Hi, everyone. It's 8 in the a.m. here on a Friday morning. It's time for our next discussion. But before we get into it, we both have kids.
Yes.
Several. How do you explain, like, what is dangerous to them or possible dangers to your kids?
All right. So I think every parent's or every household will be different. But for me, I would tell them. Sometimes I would frantic, especially when they were kids, right? And let's say they were like washing their hands because you have to wash your hand frequently, and then water would drip, then they would slip.
Okay.
Why not?
Yes.
But with my older kids, I would tell them, like, you know, trying to make them as not an adult, but for them to understand when you do this, this might happen and you may slip, right?
Okay.
But it turns out
listen?
sometimes they don't, right? And they're just being kids. And then when it happened, I don't scold them. And sometimes we're like, see, I told you.
Right.
I would really want to say that as a
Right.
parent. But I know I hold myself and I said, so this is what would happen. It hurts, right? So next time you shouldn't do this anymore. And they would listen better as opposed to as you scold them.
Right. But again, like those are light incidences, and I'm assuming they're okay. They slip and fell, probably hurt a bit or got a bruise, but thankfully they're okay. But in more dangerous situations, you wouldn't want them to have to experience it in order to learn not to do it, right?
Well, I mean, I'm very imminent, though, especially if you're talking about this body part area.
Yes.
That's like a sit down. I talk to them. I'm very like straightforward and very stern. Don't let anyone, you know, even like for me, when you're going to grow older, I can't at a certain age or whatnot. So they understand how very important it is and how dangerous it is.
Use any scare tactics at all sometimes?
No.
And sometimes I have to resort to it if she doesn't listen. I'm like, look, this can happen to you. Like more of a, kind of like giving them an example of what can happen. And I have a 7-year-old daughter. I'm like, hey, this is your moneymaker. You don't want any of this to happen to you. So anyway, before we talk more about how parents can help kids recognize any sort of danger, we have a story to share with you about that shows how danger could happen to our children at any time. Oh, the latest sensation around Indonesia these days are lato-lato or clackers. They're hot among many Indonesian children right now, but like many other toys, they're not entirely harmless. In fact, in West Kalimantan, a child recently had to undergo surgery after a shard from his or her clackers struck them in the eye, while another one in Sukabumi had to be treated after the same toy hit her in the mouth.
That's why no lato-lato in my house. And there are growing reports of children having to receive medical assistance after consuming the so-called chiking-a-bul, a popular street snack that uses liquid nitrogen so it would produce smoke. In November last year, a health center in Tasikmalaya reported 23 cases of poisoning from the snack, with one having to be hospitalized. And in December, a child in Bekasi suffered a perforated stomach after consuming the snack.
Yeah, that last one was pretty disturbing. Because it's not their own choice to play with a toy, but in fact it was a food they consumed that they thought was harmless as well. So how can we as parents, and you guys as well, help our kids recognize the dangers of either their games or food or anything that they encounter in their daily lives? Well, to answer, hopefully, those questions, joining us today is psychologist and Relasi Diri founder, Anastasia Satriyo. Good morning, Banas. Great to have you again in person this time.
Yeah, before we do it online.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Go ahead, Carol.
All right, so we're talking, and actually Paul and I was sharing how, you know, we do it in our household, our parenting skills, in regards to sharing or telling our kids about danger. So what is the right way, actually?
Yeah, for instance, we have to understand first that becoming a parent is the hardest job ever in this world.
Yes.
And no one prepared us for it. So, in fact, we have to keep learning nowadays. And speaking about danger, from a child psychologist perspective, I can say to you that a child's brain is like the underdeveloped computer. So they don't have any installment about what is danger, what is not. So everything about their information and awareness should come from the parents itself. And sometimes maybe parents say, oh, I think it's the school job to tell them. But you know, school have many students, and then they have the curriculum to be filled on. So it must be the parents' job to help the kids understand the dangers about everything. But we also, as a parents, has to understand about how the child's brain function. It means that below 5 years old, they really know about the concrete things. I mean, you cannot just making some, oh, don't do this, but you don't have the concrete experience. Okay, see, for example, when I was 3 years old, sister back then, she plays with the fire, you know. Sometimes if we don't understand, oh, the children thinking in a concrete way, we just said, oh, don't play with the fire.
Right.
But we have to make them understand in a concrete way. So what my mom do is she used the paper and then she put it on the fire, and then she says, look, this fire can make burn the paper. How is it about your hand? That kind of thinking and the way of explanation should be taught to children. So don't just do the verbal explanation, but do it in a concrete way, because it's how the children's brain function.
I see. So the kind of like similar to what you said, but instead of the example happening to them, show what the things
case studies,
else. So, what about scare tactics? Does that work? Is that advisable to do? Because sometimes, I'll give you my experience.
Yes.
When I don't know if it's true with you guys. When you tell kids not to do something, sometimes it makes them want to do something.
They're very curious.
Yes.
So how do you think that works?
I think from my perspective, it's depend.
Okay.
We have to see the child, because for me nowadays about a lot of parenting stuff and tips. For me, it's about marketing things, like what kind of parents that the child have, what kind of parents we are, what kind of person we are, and then what type of the person of the child.
I see.
So we have to make an in between.
The personality of the child,
goodness of it, we call it.
Yeah.
So there's a kids that when you give a scare tactic, they obey.
Right.
But most of the kids and most of my clients is very curious and having high intelligence. So kayak, oh my God, why you have to scare me? They will more curious about the scare things.
Right.
And we have to explain other things about the scary things that we explain to them.
Yeah.
And it's not true. Wow, we
go in circles.
Yeah, it will make us more headache, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, good
So
point.
because every children is very different, like you said, different personalities and characters, so we kind of have to divert how to tell them, you know, with each kid. So let's say I have 3 kids, you do too. We can't use the same way to all 3 kids. So it has to be customized to like every children itself. You know, sometimes I don't know like about parenting now, but I know my parents. I remember them when I was a kid before. When I do something wrong, and then they're like, "See, mommy told you, right?" So those little things that happen to us, those little injuries and whatnot, is it applicable now to the parenting skill nowadays when we said something to them, they didn't listen, it happened to them, and we're like saying, see, this would happen. Exactly. Is that still okay in a way, or?
Well, when we learn more about the mental health perspective and emotional development, the healthy emotional development of the child and how their brain thinking, I think just to make them see, mommy told you, papa told you, don't have any better, because they just feel, oh, the parents blame me. You know, the kids see the parents very high, like the omnipotent God for the children. So when we blame them, the internalized is like, I'm wrong, but they not probably learning from what their mistakes.
Correct. Yeah.
But we also should learn about learning to regulate our own emotion, because it's also on the tip of our tongue, right? To talk about that. But the important thing is to make the children understand and to know there is scales of risk. You know, there is that. Okay, if you try this. If they slip a little bit or they have some bruises, it's okay. But you know, there's the case that a child take the like the dishes cleaner in the house and then make the burn on the throat. I don't think we don't know.
Okay.
Of course, different. I think different cases is very different,
cases,
right?
So we have to have priority also.
Of course.
What kind of risk that it's okay for the kids to learn from the accidents, which is very dangerous.
Right. It's kind of like a simple way would be like, this is spicy food. If you don't believe me, just try it a little bit. And if it's too spicy, then you'll remember.
It's safe danger, right?
Yes.
Is it okay to remind them of that then? Because my wife uses this term, I don't know what it is in English, but she said, jangan donder anak kita, like don't keep on harping on the same thing over and over again because it's too much for them. And then after a while, it's just kind of redundant. Like they don't listen.
They won't even listen anyways after that.
So how much, what's the limit there? How much should you remind your kids? Like, hey, remember what happened last time?
The important thing is to understand that nowadays kids should have 2 ways of communication. Maybe we don't have it in our time.
No, you're right.
One direction, you know,
Always
very authoritarian. But nowadays, like giving a conversation like, do you remember like what happened before? And then we have to listen and wait.
How did you feel at the time, right?
And also remember what do you remember from that time? We have to see the child's recalling the memory. It's not just we go with the preaching and
because that will stick in their minds a little bit more, right? So where do we draw the line when it comes to, here's, as parents, we are instinctively wanting to protect our children all the time.
Of course.
But I've also heard that having children that are too sheltered doesn't allow them to learn life lessons as well. So where do we draw that line? It's a very gray area. Like you said, we're constantly learning, and I don't believe I have it down pat as well.
So basically, everything should be in moderation.
Okay.
We teach and we raise a human being. It's not a robot, it's not a chair, and it's not a person, it's not animals, of course. So the balance between giving them freedom and giving them rules should come hand in hand. But the important thing, I think, for a parents is you can do evaluation for what you do for the kids for every 3 months, because the brain of the kids keep changing and very rapidly.
Right?
So for these 3 months, from January to March, we will do this kind of things. Even sometimes there's a little things that it should be doing for a month, and after that we re-evaluate. How is it going for the child, for us, and then we can changing. The thing that we think that parenting, it should be one way, like very rigid things. In fact, it's very dynamic, and then we can see every 3 months, every 6 months, how is it going to the child. So hopefully parents at home, you can re-evaluate your parenting skill and communication every 3 months. Like we have like 3 months evaluation when we are at home.
Right, like we need to be flexible, basically.
Yes,
right?
parents, to be a parent is a blessing, but again, it comes with a lot of homework. Now, you know, in regards to, especially nowadays, I think children are prone to, you know, using their gadgets, watching, you know, online platforms and whatnot. So they're used to trending things like this Lato Lato. Lato Lato is not allowed in my house, but I know there are games, especially my sons is 9 and 6. They love to play games, right? And in regards to this, I'm not a gamer person, but you know, there are so many stories, especially if they're playing online games. So I'm there next to, you know, my boys, and I watch them. And especially, I told them that you cannot chat with anybody. This should not be an online and just an offline game, even though you're playing on your gadgets. How can we, as parents, keep up with the trend, and also kind of like let them understand that some of the trending games are not suitable for you yet, for your age, let's say.
Yeah, I think I really appreciate what you've done for your kids, because we have to do the hard job becoming parents, to monitor them and then to do the talking, make them understanding. I think for me, it's like you just choose, you want a long-term effect or a short-term effect. It's a short-term effect, we just like, oh yeah, please don't do that, or just giving a very harsh punishment. But for the long-term effect, we have to do the talking things with the kids, make them understand, and we have to understand the children even below 13 years old or 15 years old, they don't have any capacity enough to make the discernment by themselves. So we have to put ourselves beside them, or to monitor once in a while. For example, for my adolescent client, I taught the parents is an agreement with the kids that they can check the handphone for every 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, because we want to learn to trust the child, of course, and then the child also learn how the parents can trust them. But their limited function of the brain, we have to make to minimize the risk, and then if there is something happen, we can talk sooner, from 2 or 3 weeks. We don't do it like, oh, in 6 months there will be okay. It's too dangerous.
Kids grow so fast. Technology.
But just in regards to this, though, I mean, I do have a follow-up question, if you don't mind, Paul. We're living in a world where there's a lot of danger right now. It's very different when we're kids, right? And then, but you know, parenting skills, like you were saying before, there's so many parenting that you cannot even say no to your kids, and we always have to have this positive mind, and you know, we have to be aware with their mental healthness. So where should we put the boundaries as parents? Like, yes, we have to share with them everything about positivity, but there are also some negatives, so they'll be aware. So how many percentage should we share with them about dangers and negativity that is happening in the world? Because they have to prepare themselves too.
Yeah, I think from my perspective as a clinical psychologist, mostly I give a tailor-made suggestion for for each of them. But for the general understanding, maybe we can see how old are they nowadays, and how is their emotional function. Because nowadays, when we experience life after pandemic, there's happening a phenomenon called asynchronous development. So it means that the child maybe the age is 13 years old, but the functional of emotion is 8 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Okay. Because 2.5 years having no contact and isolate at home, it's quite quite something for their brain, because the brain nowadays, we understand the brain is like a muscle. If you don't train the muscle, and then it gets deteriorated.
Right.
The same like the brain. So we should make an examination of the child to understand how is their cognitive function and how is their emotional function, because sometimes there's a gap and discrepancy, and then with that gap, we have to make it more even, so we can understand the child better. After that, we should understand that, oh, if the child functioning in below the emotional level is below, so we should make an explanation, treat them like an elementary school, for example.
Basically treat them at the age that they're mentally developed, as opposed to physical.
Because the understanding nowadays from the psychological research that we cannot push the child like, oh, I'm in here, you are in there, go to my place. No, but okay, you don't understand.
We have to go to them.
So they can elevate their maturity.
Oh my God, that's a lot of homework.
Actually, never thought. That was actually a good point there.
Yeah.
I know we're quickly running out of time, but if I may, real quick, you mentioned something that is new to me as well, the concept of a short term, for example, just don't do that, as opposed to building a long term. Is there an example when we can use one over the other, where one is actually more beneficial than the other?
Yeah, for me, I really like to encourage parenting to do parenting coaching, or to make ourselves also having a good self-care, so we can use our intuition as a parents. I really believe
it starts with us, doesn't it?
Yeah, I really believe that maybe I learned many years to become a child psychologist, but I really respect parents, that I really trust that parents have their intuition. What time that we have to use the short term, like you cannot do this right now, but when it's like, okay, this is the consequences, and then we can have a time, we have a patient enough. I think trust your intuition and trust yourself.
Because it is our children, by the way.
Yeah, so you can't do anything wrong, because you only want your kids' best interest in mind, so trust what you think and trust what you feel. I like that. Thank you so much, Anastasia.
Thank you, Anastasia.
I wish we could talk a little bit more, but unfortunately we are out of time.
Yes, all right, so thank you very much. Hopefully you have a great day. And now we're going to take a break. When we return, we'll have a recap from our previous segment right here in the C Morning Show. We'll be right back.
No lato, Ali, sorry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Where do you have your...